So the next section that we are going to address is data stewardship. And as I mentioned real shortly after Sean finished the last section on lineage, stewardship really drives, is going to drive the success of your both not only your data governance program, but your Alation implementation as well. So what does good stewardship look like? So stewardship in essence optimizes and defends how your data is being used throughout your organization. So it's going to support the business. It's going to support policies around data. It's going to support to some extent the quality of the data. It's going to support the description of the data. And it's going to make end users or users in general more efficient in how they use the data and how they find that data. So some of the other areas that are key is the data and assets can easily be verified. They're understandable. It is clear what data, which data is the right data to use for reports and investigations. So that is very clear, but not just investigations. I would add what right data is used for business analysis, data science, etc. So these are some of the really good areas that good stewardship allows us to do and really optimizes. Another final point to make on this slide is there's no reinventing the wheel. So it's not that when you have good stewardship, you have somebody that really understands the data in their particular domain or their particular business unit. So it really allows you to have a mastery of your data in that area. And so you don't have to, if you don't have that mastery, you end up having to reinvent that wheel. You end up having to constantly redo it, a little bit like Groundhog Day, that it's every morning it's the same thing. And so good stewardship allows us to circumvent that. Um, the other areas that good stewardship really enable us to address is, understand not only our data, but also the sensitivity of the data. We live, and I've mentioned in a couple of the previous slides and areas that we've already discussed, the importance of regulatory, especially specifically around PI data. With all the legislation that's arising lately, GDPR, and I've mentioned CCPA, and other privacy laws that are rising in other countries. This is becoming such an important area that needs to be addressed. So the legislative aspect of data is an area that good stewardship will be able to address. This also allows us to address audits much easier. So having good stewardship allows us to address both internal and external audits. So if there's the internal auditors coming to understand how data is being used, or if who has access to it, this can be truly addressed immediately. And this also goes in line with addressing auditors. So if you have financial audits that are required, we've mentioned Sarbanes-Oxley as a good example. Good stewardship will enable that to occur and address in a much more efficient manner. It also allows us to address how data is going to be used. So the appropriate use, ensuring that the right data is used at the right time when someone needs it. So this is where good stewardship plays, I think probably its critical factor is because I think that really encompasses all these other areas around that we've discussed on data. So a little bit around how data stewards get organized, how things are organized in such a way within Alation that allows us to really empower everybody in an organization. So you have everything from, and I'm not going to go through all these areas, but Sean's going to cover some of these areas in the demo. So, but just to give you an understanding, so data can be in domains, how it's organized, how it's structured. Data will be found in custom fields. You can use tags for data. Specific ways that data is tagged, they mean certain ways. Glossaries, data is where data is defined. You can collect data, or you can address, for example, data and policies around article groups, and then taxonomies as well, where you allow the ability to navigate through data much easier. And so all these areas, data stewardship is able to address. There's some pros and cons to each one of these, some examples of how that occurs. But this in essence is how your data will be organized within, or can be within Alation. So with that said, I will send it over to Sean, who will go through a short demo on how this occurs. Sean, take it away.
Thanks, Salvador. All right, so uh, yeah, data stewardship. I mean, this is one rabbit hole you can go down for a long time. Like, there's it's pretty expansive, and uh, in the number of ways a steward can be supportive of the Alation site and building out content and curating it and being support to other consumers. We could really spend a ton of time here, but for this webinar's purpose, right? I'm just going to try and call out some key points, some things to highlight that I think are great for thinking about out of the box, getting started with your stewardship on the Alation site, as well as some of the more next things you might want to tackle, such as the sensitive data stuff that Salvador had mentioned before. So the mindset, I think a great mindset to be in is the acronym FUTURE that Alation has shared before. And basically FUTURE stands for find, understand, trust, use, and reuse, right? So when thinking about building out all of the descriptions and where to focus on first in your catalog and all the different custom fields you might need, if you kind of keep in mind what the end user's journey is like, right? First, they're just going to be trying to find the relevant sources that are related to their search. Then they need to start to understand what it is that they're looking at, things to be aware of, whether those are policies or who they need to get in touch with. Some of the data quality stuff that we talked about and building that trust and building out those trust check flags with those endorsements. And then finally being able to use and potentially reuse different objects throughout the catalog site, right? If you come from that mindset, that should kind of help be a pretty good guidance in terms of what do you think you need to start building out on the Connect site? Like what should I put in this description section, or what custom fields do I think I need? It can as you start to connect to your sources in the beginning and you start to ingest all those tables and columns, it can feel a bit overwhelming on how am I going to tackle all of this. So keeping FUTURE in mind, as well as a couple other things that I'll mention here in a second, can in terms of prioritization, will be able to kind of help get you started and kind of chip away at things and kind of have that model to be able to build out a Connect or Alation site that over time will continue to grow in value. So let's just kind of take a look at what I've got up in front of our page here, or on the screen here, right? Back to our channels view page. And you can see this is actually a pretty well built out page that's got a lot of information here. So in this particular page, we've kind of shuffled around some of the layout a little bit to our preference. So in this case, we wanted to really highlight who the stewards were. So anybody that wanted to know who they needed to get in touch with around this particular view, they'll know exactly right away. It's front and center, right? But usually what's going to be usually the first thing you're going to see is this description section. Now, in this case, it's a pretty short and simple, straight to the point section. As we have talked about before, this is a pretty flexible area that's going to allow you not to just write out your basic description, but allow you to link to other objects or users that are in the Alation site. It's going to allow you to actually embed and build out tables or embed links to videos or images and all of those potentially supportive context that a user might need in terms of understanding what this particular view is all about. On the right-hand side is typically where a lot of your custom fields are going to live, though, like we did with the stewards, you can actually kind of push that over to the middle and change the layout. But sometimes description sections can get pretty long, so calling out some of these particular fields over here on the right are going to allow those to pop out a little bit more and be a little bit easier for your users to find. And a lot of these are also going to be fields that can be filtered on when you're performing an advanced user search. Domains are definitely going to be one of the first types of filters you might apply, but you might also be searching for things that are consisting of a particular tag or might be related to particular articles or whatever those custom fields that you built out here on the right. They're often going to be something you can filter on as you're browsing throughout the Alation site. So this is kind of basic first place you'll go is start building out descriptions, tags, assigning stewards and owners. Those are going to be critical for your users to start to not just understand, but be able to know who to reach out to and start to collaborate with, and if they have any questions or concerns or suggestions. In terms of prioritizing what to focus on first, like you might have an idea of in your head of like, hey, this is what's in my scope. I need to hit these particular tables right off the bat. But sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming as you're ingesting so many different data source objects. If you perform what's called a query log ingestion, Alation actually has the ability to perhaps start to help prioritize some of those objects for you. So if you're not sure which table or data source to start focusing on first, if you start to ingest those query logs, Alation's going to read through those and start to pick up on a couple of things. First, it's going to pick up just general popularity. So as I switched over here, you can see that within this particular schema, it's actually giving me a popularity ranking on all of the tables that are in this schema. Now, this is a schema that's only consisting of 6 tables. There's not a whole lot going on here. But if I had hundreds of tables or thousands of tables, this popularity bar actually would become a lot more helpful. And this is going to tell me as a potential steward that says, hey, it sounds like more people are coming to this table than all the tables below it. Maybe you want to start focusing on that first and building out everything that you need there, since so many people are hitting that table. So you want to make sure that they know exactly what this table is about. You might need to make sure that all these people that are hitting this table are aware of potential policies that they need to be aware of. And also perhaps, and certainly add a steward or a particular owner of this table so that if anyone has any questions or needs help with anything, they know exactly who to reach out to instead of guessing or just asking around and slowing down the process. So the popularity bar is definitely great. As I come back to my other tab here with my channel views, another thing that Alation will pick up on is the top users that are actually hitting that particular data object. So this is going to also be helpful if you're not sure who should be the person in charge of managing this page, whether it's at the data source level or here. Understanding who are the people that are querying that table the most often, getting that kind of top hit user list could be helpful for you to start having conversations with those users, whether it's perhaps asking them to step up and be the go-to steward for this particular page, or perhaps using them as a reference to understand, hey, what should users be aware of? If I'm in charge of curating the content on this page, maybe I can set up a couple calls with some of these users here to get a sense of, hey, what should I be aware of? Can you tell me, since you're the one that's using this table the most often, you seem to be the expert, can you kind of help fill me in on exactly what other users should be aware of this? So those are a couple places to kind of help get your feet under yourself as you start out using Alation and ingesting all of those sources. Taking advantage of top users and the popularity bar are going to be great. Other areas that are going to be helpful to start to curate and be aware of for your end users as you're in that stewardship role. Salvador had mentioned the identifying sensitive data, right? Again, we talked about sample content a little bit before. We know that it is an optional feature. It's not something that will automatically get brought in. By default, this feature is turned off. It's something you would enable and bring in. But there might be cases where there's enough sample data we want to bring in where it's going to be it's going to provide a lot of benefits. But if we're going to do that, we also need to be aware of particular columns or data values that we don't want certain people to see. So Alation does give you the ability to mask certain data, right? And data values in columns. If we wanted to make sure we were hiding a particular ID, this is just an ID that probably doesn't mean much here, but maybe if this was like an SSS or a social security number, SSN number, right? Or anything else that might be part of PII, hey, there might be other values on this table that we still want to bring in for the sampling purposes, but we want to hide those particular columns. Well, Alation's going to give you the ability to actually manage that. So if you're a data source admin, you'll have the ability to come into the source settings. And among other things here are going to be specifically your ability to bring in samples and actually kind of curate how you want to go about those samplings and how much you want to bring in. But we also have a tab here called the per object parameters. So if I click in and start drilling down a little bit, you can start to see a couple of options here right away, which is, hey, do we want to make this particular table browsable? Meaning, do we want this to be something that people can stumble upon as they're searching the site? You can actually remove that from search lists. One note there is it won't take it off Alation altogether. If someone knew this particular table and wanted to go to it directly with the URL or search for that exactly, they can still find it. But this basically kind of is like an initial blocker for people coming to it directly. But the other column you can see here is the sampling column. So if I didn't want to include any particular table as part of that sample ingestion, I can just start going down the list here and start unchecking those objects that I want to remove. And when I run the sample scanner the next time, it would not include that, and in fact, it would actually remove those samples. So that can be super helpful in terms of managing tables altogether, or sources altogether, if you wanted to kind of adjust how people are coming through the Alation site and finding particular data values. Okay, moving along is, right, as you're perhaps maybe one of the head stewards of the Alation site that have a team of stewards helping you build out the content throughout the Alation site, you might want to get a sense of, all right, well, how much activity is going on? How much progress have we made? Alation's got, and I'll show you how I got to this page. So Alation's got, back to our apps drawer tab. If I open that up, you'll see there is a second drop down under curate here, which has a few options here. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these here today, but I will click into a couple of them. So the first one I'll jump into here is called the Stewardship dashboard. And this will give me a couple just helpful items here, whether it's relevant to just myself or perhaps the Alation site as a whole. For now, most of this is going to default to just giving me information about me personally and how my stewardship progress is being, how it's been going. So you can see of the objects that I've been assigned to, I've only been able to do about 10% curation progress. Now, the way this is calculated, and you can see I'm hovering over the little information box here, is just understand that, all right, the more you build out the content for a particular page, right, the more this number is going to go up. But sometimes this number doesn't behave the way people expect, and a lot of that has to just do with the way it's being calculated. So if there's, if you've curated a lot of the fields on a particular table page, but you haven't gone down to the column level page and curated those objects as well, this number incorporates both the table and the column. So basically, the parent and the child objects, it's considering all of that and the total curation throughout that relationship. And so something to be aware of is that if this number is not creeping up as high as you thought it might just have to do with not going to the depth of filling out the children to the extent, going down to that level enough. Now, I wouldn't be obsessed with getting to this to 100%, right? There are certain times you don't really need to go down to the column level. Other times there are. So some of this is going to be up to your preference. But the point here is that you can monitor your personal progress, or I can actually adjust these filters here and get a sense of what's going on at the site as a whole. Looking further down the page, we've got just the stewardship catalog activity from what I've been doing recently. The last part of this page here is just looking at data stewards throughout the Alation site as a whole, and just for now looking at tables, but I can switch this up by object type, and just getting a sense of, hey, how many stewards are we assigning? And again, this is a critical curation step to make, is assigning stewards to objects, so your consumers or your browsers of the Alation site know who to reach out to, or we at least know who's responsible for certain pages. From here, I can jump into a little bit more detailed view and kind of get a sense of the curation progress. Whether, if I back out of myself here for a sec, again, you kind of have those same filters and just get a little bit more in-depth look at what's going on. And back to our popularity bar, right? We wanted to know what to focus on first, and we can see if our curation progress is matching our popularity, because these are probably the items we're going to want to prioritize first. So we want to put more focus into curating these assets first. And so we want to make sure that these percentages, or these curation progress percentages, are growing probably first before some of these other objects. I'm sure there's going to be some objects that are a little bit more important down here that might be depending on what your objectives and goals are. But in general, usually we see that whatever is the most popular is typically where people want to focus on first. So this is actually the second tab here in terms of this curate dropdown. I'm going to skip these three really here. The only other one I'll call out for now is we have the ability to kind of just come here and start assigning data objects or stewards of data objects a little bit more efficiently. And we can just kind of come down here and just start searching for users. So if I were familiar with any of these particular data objects, I can start assigning those stewards here right away and kind of just, again, help that curation progress start to grow. You can also, from an advanced user search, assign steward as well. So if I came into an advanced search, started checking off a number of objects here, this is one of those bulk actions. Bulk actions is actually coming in here and start updating steward as well. So that could be very helpful. Just another way I go about browsing the site. The last thing I will touch on here is just with regards to glossaries. And this is something that you can probably even build out your own section to in terms of the importance of having a glossary built out for your organization. Talking about standardization, avoiding misinterpretation, helping people, if they're new to a company, they're not sure about the abbreviations or acronyms used within your organization, right? There's a lot of self-service needs for this, but in terms of a steward, definitely another place that you want to make sure you're building out. So if you were with us during the policy section of the webinar, you'll see this page is laid out the same way, where we have our terms at the bottom, as well as ability to group those terms by a particular glossary type. So you can see we've broken this out basically by departments, but it's important to start building out this as well and leveraging these terms by embedding them into descriptions or typically this will be embedded into descriptions as you're building out those fields for your data objects. But something not to be overlooked because if people aren't understanding the terms in the right way, they might be applying calculations incorrectly. Thus, your dashboards and your reports might not be interpreted the same way universally throughout your organization. And if that's the case, you're going to have a lot of discrepancies, and in the end, going to end up having to do a lot of work and lose a lot of time. So, yeah, I just wanted to cover this briefly around glossaries, that this is here. This is definitely a feature of the site and something as a steward you want to make sure that you're contributing to as well. All right. That's all I had for you guys here today in terms of the curation. Again, this is something we can go down a much further rabbit hole, but I really just wanted to cover some of the basics at a high level here and just let you know what's available at your hands within the Alation site.